Coming up on this episode of the Real Estate Revolution.
All of our children have moved that way since becoming adults. And so we have one in Virginia right on the border of Tennessee, one in Wisconsin, and whose husband works in Tennessee a lot. And so they may end up there, and then one in Colorado. So just kind of being somewhere that we think we'll enjoy and that will be closer to them.
This episode is so full of great questions and great strategies. You are not going to want to miss this. Make sure you listen till the end.
Welcome back to the Steve D. Valentine Show. I'm here with my guest, Melanie Abeyta. I did it. See what happened? Melanie Abeyta. She runs a med spa called Harmony Aesthetics in the Santa Monica area. And she has some amazing real estate questions, so we're going to see if we can't throw some strategies together. Melanie, thanks for jumping on and agreeing to do this.
Yeah.
And so I'm super excited to be here with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to learn more.
How's the weather in LA?
You know, we've had an incredibly cold and rainy winter, so it's hard to complain when you live in LA about weather, but we find a way to do that anyway. And so
right.
When the sun comes, we appreciate it more, right?
Awesome. Well, you can always come out here to Phoenix. We got plenty of sunshine for you.
Right. I spent my early childhood in Arizona, and I love it. I love everything about it.
Yeah, it's a great place.
It is.
So Melanie and I met recently through Chris Harder's Elite Mastermind, and we talked a little bit about real estate. She's in the process of doing a massive TI on a new space that she's got in LA, and my mouth kind of dropped when we were talking when she told me what the rent price is. So for those of you that are writing about the price of rent for your location, what are you paying for rent on your space?
The new space will be $16,000 for less than 3,000 square feet. Right.
Welcome to LA.
Yeah.
Well, where do you want to start?
Well, I think, I did start investing in real estate when I was young. I was probably 25, and my husband and I built a duplex. It was my idea, and we are like, we'll live in one side. We were both young and having children, and live in one side and rent out the other, and that will afford us a lot more freedom. And so we did that. I think we only lived in that side for a year.
Okay.
During that, we finished both basements because this is in Colorado where people have basements.
Right.
And then we were able to save, money and buy our personal home. But since then, we haven't really moved further with that. We still own that property.
Awesome.
I think it's, a little less than 23 years, 24 years, something like that, which is awesome. But, our goal was to continue investing in real estate, but, life happened and that didn't happen. So I think we're kind of ready to do that. So just finding the best way to move forward. So I think my first question was, we do have a lot of equity. I think somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 in that property. And, because we are spending so much of our money now expanding business, and wanting to get into more to real estate, do we take equity out of that property in order to buy other properties, or do we just hang on to that one, pay it off, and then buy more?
So let's just talk about future strategy. Is that, what point in time do you and your husband, is it 5 years, 10 years, that you want to start seeing that passive income being generated? Because obviously you have some passive income from it, but it's, we've got cost of mortgage and those types of things.
Right. So I would say, I'm 50. I plan on working as much as I am, probably the next 10 years, building this business. I have another location opening in Colorado, and, kind of building during that time. And so in 10 years, starting to be more passive income, I would say.
Well, if you didn't know, I've released my first book and published. It is available on Amazon, Limitless Real Estate Strategies. I wrote this for anybody in the real estate business. I don't care if you're a real estate agent, lender, wholesaler, investor. This will help you change and break some myths that you think are out there. It will also change your life, change your legacy, and ultimately help you build wealth while creating win-win strategies. So pick it up on Amazon today.
So you finished out the basements in those, and so what does each unit currently rent for?
So the smaller side, it's about 1,800 square feet, and it rents for 2,400.
Okay.
And then the larger side is, I think, about 2,200 square feet, and it rents for about 2,900, I think.
That is some serious great rental for something that you bought 20 years ago, 25 years ago. That's amazing. What's the current mortgage payment on the property?
I think it's around 1,100.
Okay. So we've got some serious cash flow on this one. So the question always is with something like this. So you said you've got $400,000 in equity. Have you ever refinanced this or taken any equity out of it, or is it the same mortgage from what?
We've never taken any equity out, but we have refinanced it.
How long ago do you think you
It's
refinanced
had
it?
to have been like 10 years ago,
Okay.
I want to say.
Okay. Do you know what your current interest rate is?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I think it's good. It's not crazy.
Probably in the fours.
It's not anything high where we're like,
Okay.
yeah.
So here's the cool thing. When you have something like this, $1,100, I'm just going to say you're roughly about $5,000 a month in rent. So you're about $3,900 a month in passive income from this particular investment. So the question is, that money sitting there, if you refinance and you pull 300 grand out of it, you're obviously going to change your mortgage payment substantially. The good news is what it's going to do is that it's going to increase your ability to maybe go into another direction and invest in some more properties, right? Because right now, we're only getting the benefit of the cash flow and the appreciation and the fact that it's being paid off right now, but we just have one property, right? But what if you guys were able to pull that money out? You're going to lessen your cash flow, obviously on a monthly basis, but you're able to put it into, say, 3 more properties that are being paid down, they're appreciating, and so now you would have technically 4 to 5 properties that you're writing off, that you're creating some cash flow, not a ton, but remember, cash flow we really want in about 10 years. But if you look at 10 years of depreciation and potentially appreciation, what does it look like for your future at that point? And so the hard part always is like, do we refinance, or are we better off just saving some money and buying another asset and doing that over and over again down the road? Does any of that appeal, as far as if you had, because it depends on where you're at. Because if you take $300,000 out of the property, you're going to change your interest rate quite a bit in the current market, when it comes down to that. So if I look at numbers, and again, there's going to be some offset when it comes down to it. So what do you remember what you owe on the property, or roughly?
I believe it's a little over 100,000, maybe like between 100 and 120.
Okay. Such a great investment. Congrats on that. So many people look back and regret, like, should have sold it or whatever. But I mean, for you guys holding it, that's amazing. So what do you think it's really worth right now?
I think at the height of the market, kind of when everything, we kept getting offers for people to buy it. And I think we got around like 525 at the high.
See, and I would say from a standpoint of like, even if you paid $600,000 or $700,000 for the rent that's coming in on that, that makes a ton of sense. So 525, I think, is low on the property just because of what it's cash flowing right now. And what part of Colorado is that in?
It's in southern Colorado.
Okay.
It's in a city called Pueblo West, which is like actually surrounds a reservoir.
Okay.
So it's a really nice family area.
So here's what it looks like. If we were to actually be able to pull $400,000 out of it, you owe $100,000, you refinance for $500,000. Your new mortgage payment is going to be about $3,500 a month, which still is going to allow you to cash flow about $1,500 to $2,000 a month on the property. Now you have $500,000. Now, the question is, what do we do with the $500,000? Well, we want to try to increase some of our cash flow from, hey, we're moving this money from one place to the next, but we don't want to just buy rental properties just to buy rental properties. We want to buy something that might have some equity in it. Maybe it needs some work, those types of things. So if you look at $500,000, you can do one of two things. You could go out and say, like in the Phoenix area where I'm at, okay, well, can we buy a $350,000 house, put $100,000 down, even in the current interest rate climate, because non-owner occupied, your interest rates are going to be somewhere in that 6.5% to 7%. And does it make sense right now to where, hey, we bought a little bit of equity and we've got a $250,000 mortgage. You're going to cash flow about maybe $150 to $200 a month. But here's the difference is that if you did that and you did it 5 times, so $100,000 per house, you would now own 6 rental properties, which are going to adjust with some tax basis because you've got some depreciation. Now you have 6 properties equaling about right around $2 million, maybe closer to $2.5 million that are all being paid off by somebody else over this next 10-year period of time. Rather than, okay, we have one property that is definitely cash flowing, but we don't have all the benefits. Because think about this. If you had executed this plan in 2017, yes, the duplex wouldn't have been as high in value. But if you'd gone and bought 5 more homes prior to everything going up, what would that portfolio look like? Right?
Yeah,
so that's
much better.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we look at over the next 10 years, yeah, we're in a place right now where the market's down a little bit, which is a great place to be buying, is when there's motivation. And can we build the rental portfolio so that, hey, if all of a sudden there's another upturn, and even if there's not another upturn, and you're getting 5% appreciation on $2.5 million versus 5% appreciation on $500,000, what's the difference as you go forward in that 10 years? So that's really what it looks like to pull that equity out, and it's kind of in a season where like, oh, I really don't want to touch it. But as an investor or a non-owner occupant, there's really only one way to pull that cash out. You can't do a home equity line because they don't do HELOCs against non-owner occupied. There's some banks that do, but it's super expensive when it comes down to the HELOC. So you're better off taking this and refinancing it into a long-term note. Now, one of the other pieces of advice that I would have on this particular one is you could do standard refinancing where you have to provide tax returns and income statements and all that other stuff. And you're self-employed. Is your husband self-employed?
He is.
Sometimes this is like a pain in the rear end for those of us that are self-employed, right?
I've heard.
But they have this program that's called DSCR's debt service ratio coverage for rental properties, to where they are lending based on 75% loan to value. They're lending based on the cash flow that's coming in. And it's very, very simple qualifying when it comes down to pulling that cash out. And you can do cash out up to, I think, 70% loan to value. So, So it's a fairly streamlined process. And it's specifically what they're doing is they're asset-based lending. So they're based on the value of the property and the rental income. And that's what they're basing off. They're not so much basing it off your tax returns, income, or any of those other things. They're doing asset-based lending. So you pay a little bit higher interest rate, but it's a very easy process to get through something like that. Then you have your cash out, and now you start looking at, okay, where do I want to deploy my cash that is going to make it work and further rather than it just sitting there, because the only return it's getting is the cash-on-cash return that you have, which is extremely high in comparison to what you guys paid for it, right? Because if you're looking at what we paid for it, the cash-on-cash return we're getting is great. But if you look at the cash-on-cash return and what the value of the current property is and what you're getting for it, it's still good, but can we push it out and make it make more sense?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. I didn't know about the asset-driven loans either, so that's really good information.
A lot of people don't, but they're great to utilize, especially in your situation where it's 2 self-employed incomes. We don't want to go through all the bank statements and all the income and all the other things that goes with it. The only penalty to this is that the interest rate is a little bit higher. But for those of us that are entrepreneurs, I did 40 of these last year where we refinanced everything. It was so much easier than doing all the bank statements and leases and all the other stuff. So it is something there. But again, you pay a little bit higher rate. But if we can move, and create some advantages to paying that higher rate, and the good news is in your property, you're still going to cash flow on it, even though you're taking that out.
Very cool. And now, so Joe and I don't own a primary residence, right? When we moved from Colorado, we had our home still, but it was kind of, when life happened.
Yep.
And so ended up, just in order to keep our head above water, like selling that. And, so we've just been renting here. And so I'm not sure we want to buy a property here because, as you know, everything is just and we don't plan on staying here like after retirement. So would you suggest like just going ahead and like starting with the rental property, or I don't know, I guess it seems a little bit strange to be like buying properties when you don't own one you live in.
Well, not necessarily, because you're in a place where the taxes are high, the prices are high, and it's probably cheaper to rent than it is to buy, right? So
yes,
you're probably better off renting when it comes down to it, because if you start looking at maintenance, repairs, all the other things. Like, great, I own a home, but it's costing me, it's sucking the life out of me, right? To where
Yeah.
if you rent where you're at, it's easier just to let the landlord take care of all those things. So, I'm a huge advocate of, if you're in a super expensive place like LA or New York City, rent something there, because it doesn't make sense to actually purchase, when it comes down to the mortgage payments. Now, here's where it does make sense. So have you guys thought about, like, hey, when we're done here, where are we going to retire?
Yeah, we have. We're not exactly sure, but probably Tennessee.
Okay.
All of our children have moved that way since
Right.
becoming adults. And so we have one in Virginia, right on the border of Tennessee, one in Wisconsin, and whose husband works in Tennessee a lot. And so they may end up there, and then one in Colorado. So just kind of being somewhere that we think we'll enjoy and that will be closer to them.
So if you think about, like, planning for that, like, hey, our dream is to move to Tennessee, right? Obviously, kid things changed, all that other stuff. The cool thing about this is, what if part of the plan was pulling some of that cash out and buying the property now that you eventually want to retire to in 10 years, right? So
Yeah.
you buy something in Tennessee that you guys really love, that's more of a, hey, we're going to buy something smaller that we really enjoy, or maybe it's something bigger, who knows, whatever you guys are thinking about. But it's buying with the future premonition of, we're going to be here, so let's buy something that, even if it needs a bunch of work, but somebody can live in it as a rental. You let somebody rent it, you do the absolute minimal repairs to be, to house human beings, obviously, don't be a slumlord.
Yeah.
But then think about this, in 10 years, you're like, hey, our dream is to move into this place. We bought it for ourselves. And when that 10 years comes up, the tenant comes out, and now you can renovate it based on current trends, based on what you want. And you knew that was the plan. The only difference is,
Right.
now that house is paid off 10 years, you might refinance it, because if the rates go down, or when they go down, we'll want to refinance that into a longer term plan. And so we want to watch that over the next 10 years. But even if it's a break even asset that eventually something you guys can move into, renovate, and keep for what you want, it's a great potential plan. And if you never end up moving there, well, great, you have a rental property in that place. But it is a way that I see some doctors and people doing it, in your profession, is like, hey, where is it that I want to live in the future? So let's go ahead and buy there now, secure a good interest rate, secure a good property, let it be leased, and then we know that is part of the plan. And if the plan changes, that's okay. We still had a rental property.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense, because that's definitely one of the things we were considering. So it's good to have clarity around that, Yeah. And so I think one of the other things that, like, in real estate that I had a question surrounding is helping my kids. So, because we did do some real estate investing when they were young, they kind of get that idea. And so we've had actually two of them come to us and ask, they're young, kind of getting started, like, if we'll help them do that. And so we haven't moved forward on that yet. And I just want to know, like, what is the best way to help them? Because, we want to help our children, but we also don't want to overgive, right?
Yes.
And get ourselves into trouble because of it. Yeah.
Yes. So there's a difference in helping our kids and partnering with our kids and giving to our kids, right? We've all seen it where the parents are like, yeah, I'll co-sign for you. I'll give you a gift and down payment. So basically you've just rented your credit and you've given them a gift for down payment. And to be honest with you, you really don't get anything in return. And one of the things that I've really been teaching people is helping them understand is like, hey, if we want to help our kids in the real estate space, then let's partner with them so that we can help them make those decisions. And for instance, you could co-sign with one of your kids on a house that they are going to live in, knowing that, hey, we are partnering with this, which means I'm going to put up the down payment, you're going to pay the payments, and when you're ready to move, we're going to do this again. And if I need to co-sign for you, we're partnering on the houses, which means you guys are 50-50 owners in it. You're now helping them, and you're gaining some equity, you're gaining some tax write-off. And so now you're partnering. So maybe you do that 2 or 3 times with one of your kids, and now you guys have a little miniature rental portfolio that helps. And so here's how it helps both parties, okay? For your child,
Okay.
It helps them from the standpoint of, okay, mom and dad are going to help us. They're going to co-sign. So I might be able to buy a little bit larger home. and you're going to be either gifting or putting up the down payment for the property, which you will get back when that house is sold or whatever the case may be, right? So it's a piece of equity you own in the house. You're not giving it up to them. I'm not giving this to you. We're going to partner, and that's how I'm willing to do this. If not, I'm not willing to do it at all. So now let's just look at that from a standpoint. So now your son or daughter has a property that maybe you help them buy a little bit larger, and they're going to get some roommates to live with them. Or maybe they're married. So whatever the case may be, you're like, okay, so this is how we're going to create this business. If it's going to be roommates, you're going to put your friends in here, you're going to collect rent, and then we're going to have a monthly or quarterly meeting about the money that was collected as far as the business goes, right? So now we're running a little bit of business. They're able to purchase owner occupant, which is a benefit to you and them because it's the lowest amount down. So they might be able to put 3.5% to 5% down, and the interest rate is typically going to be cheaper because you're not buying it as an investment. So now you've done all that, and your partner's on it. You can take title together on it, and now you're helping them get into the real estate space. But the goal is to have the conversation with them is that, hey, one of the things about real estate is it's going to increase in value and equity and some other things. And so we want to continue to do this without pulling out equity until there's a certain time that we can do it and grow it further. But even if you and your child didn't, and you bought 1, 2, or 3 properties together, think about how that changes their life and their retirement down the road. And they can always buy you out of it. But there's this piece that like, hey, we have this as a family asset, right? So together we're building this little miniature business. They get to learn about it. You also get to benefit and partake in it rather than just like the gift. And so it allows you guys to kind of run that business and create that little piece together. So that's how I would do it. And that's exactly how Wendy and I are doing it with our boys, is talking to them like, hey, we've got this house. We're going to partner with you on it. We're going to keep some of the equity in it. You're going to get some equity. You're going to run it as a rental property, even though you're living here. And when you're ready to move again, which we're going to help you, we're going to do this again. Because they can move owner occupant to owner occupant. I can't. But I can co-sign with them, or I can provide the down payment even if I don't have to co-sign for them.
Okay, I see. Makes a big difference in how they treat something when they have more skin in the game as well.
100%.
Especially when they're young, right?
It also takes some of the emotions out of the purchase of, hey, I want to help you buy your first home, but it's actually going to be your first investment property. And, we're not looking, you're not going to nest here. You're not going to do these things. The business plan is we're going to buy it. You're going to live in it. You're going to do some paint in it. You're going to do some of the little nitpicky projects. And then we're going to keep it as a rental. And we're going to revisit this in 12 months and figure out if you're ready to go on to the next thing. And then we're going to do this again. And now you have this little business where you're helping them understand the value of exactly what you and your husband did. Like, you think about your kids right now, you're like, well, we can't afford to buy something. The payments are higher, this, that, and the other. But if you can do it together, are you creating or helping them create the same value that you guys were able to do 25 years ago?
Right. Only keep moving forward with it rather than stopping where we did, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is the only time that having 10 kids is an advantage over those of us that have 2.
Right. I just got 3, 10 new.
So that's
awesome. Okay, that's
a great
really
strategy
helpful.
there with kids.
Yeah. Yes. No. That's really helpful. And like I said, we really do want to help them, but not give too much, right?
Yep.
Where we don't have enough in retirement or whatever, or,
Sure.
So that's really helpful. Yeah. I'd like that. So I think, we talked about living in LA. Yeah. So looking in other, I would say buying real estate where we're at is probably not an idea. It's better to look at other places that are, are better markets. So we talked about one being Tennessee, just because we think we might end up there, but just looking in other markets outside of California, just because.
Yeah, and some of that too, you can also couple, if you bought something in Tennessee or in Phoenix or Sedona or something of that nature, you can also buy something like that as a second home, because your primary residence, even though it's a rental in California, you can buy something as a second home and you can utilize it as a second home, and you can also rent it out as well. And that comes with a little bit cheaper interest rate and a little bit less down payment as well, versus buying the investment property where it's
Just the
20%
rental.
down.
Oh, okay. So second homes, it is a better interest rate than rental
Yeah, a
properties.
little bit. Yep.
Not as good as primary, but
Correct.
a little bit better. Okay. What are some good markets right now? Like, I know you're in Phoenix, but what are some other good markets?
The markets are all different depending on what you're looking for. So when you're looking for investments, you're trying to look at a couple of different things. One, what is the potential appreciation or growth in that area? Like Phoenix is ever expanding and growing and those types of things, right? So there's potential upside here, right? It's speculation, but you're going to see it happen. We've seen it continue to happen over the last 2 decades. Versus, some people I talk to like, hey, I really like Detroit because they're cheaper homes and they cash flow and we can do these things. But you may be lacking the appreciation. You also might have a harder time collecting rents. So it's really looking at different areas that kind of have a combination of maybe some growth and, are you going to have long-term tenants in that area versus some people might want to buy like the cheapest rental property possible because it's creating cash flow to where, my opinion is like, yes, you can go to Detroit and buy a $50,000 home and you're getting $500 a month, which is a 10% rate of return or close to it, but there's no appreciation over time, but you are creating cash flow. But what if you bought something that was $150,000 that didn't cash flow as much, but it's getting 5 to 6% appreciation a year, right? I'd rather have the appreciation than the cash flow because cash flow is taxed, appreciation is not, and you can always borrow from the appreciation tax-free down the road when you're refinancing or growing. So I think market is, the different markets. Florida's a hot market, Carolina's a hot market, but it's really getting familiar with what the different markets are doing and what's happening in the rental market there as well. So, my advice would be like, hey, I like a couple of cities. So you talked about Tennessee and I like Memphis, I like Nashville. Then the next step is like either getting a hold of, which I can connect you with an agent in those areas, getting a hold of an agent and having some conversations, but then also talking to some property managers in those areas to get a feel for rents. Like, hey, how's the rental market? Is there a lot of vacancy? Was it hard to collect during COVID? And my advice would be don't buy anything in the areas that are, I guess I want to say, what are they, red states? Because the red states tend to be more tenant proactive. And so that's the hard part is that when they're tenant proactive, when you go through what we went experiencing COVID, the tenants weren't paying rent, but the landlord still had to pay mortgages, right? So you want to stay with one of those states that is going to be more landlord friendly, or at least, they're going down the middle, right? They're fighting for both, right? They're not just fighting for the tenants for free rent and those types of things.
That makes sense. Hopefully we don't ever have to go through that again, but you got to be prepared.
Right. It's happened once. It may happen again or happen different.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's very helpful. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing those questions, and hopefully it's some advice. And if you guys want to get together and do a strategy session and kind of look at connecting on, the DSCR program for the Colorado, we can do that. And then also just kind of figure out like, hey, what does the next 10 years look like and how do we create a plan?
That's amazing. Yes, I would love that.
And if you're at Santa Monica, where can they find you for, some Botox and some other fun stuff?
All the good beauty and wellness needs. Harmony Aesthetic Center. We're on Santa Monica Boulevard in West LA.
It's got to be close to the Ferris wheel on the pier, isn't it?
Very close.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. I appreciate you joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
If you are looking for a real estate strategy or coaching, mentoring, or a community to belong to, pop over to Steve D. Valentine and let's connect. This is a place where everything lives, and I am hoping to help you build your real estate wealth, life, and legacy.